Thanks very much for joining us. We came back from Davos and now in New Delhi. There seems to be this one constant theme. It's a very troubled neighborhood that we're in, but India is the beacon of hope. I have a very frank question to ask of you in your first television interview ever. Uh, are we are we over exaggerating the bright spot that India is in, or are we being a little too despondent and the reality lies somewhere in between?
So I think we should look at it both from an outside-in
Yeah,
view
exactly.
and
Yes.
also from what's happening in India. So I think relative to what's happening in the world, clearly India is in a bright spot. And if you think about where India is, for the last 18 months, people have been expecting a lot to change with the new government.
That's right.
And I think we can start seeing the green shoots. So I think it's like a double advantage, which is the world is not doing well. Outside in, India looks much better than relatively to its
Right.
peers.
Yes.
And even if you look at from an inside basis, I think things have started to move now. So I think yes. So India being a bright spot, I think is absolutely a fair statement to make.
Let me just ask you this question. In a world that we live in, and I'm going to move on to global economy in just a bit. In a world that we live in, yes, growing at 7% is very good, but India's own potential of growth has been tapered down consistently. As somebody who's a stakeholder in the Indian economy, you've got investments here, you've got business happening here. Are you disappointed that despite the euphoria we started off with when this government did take charge, growth levels are still beneath 7 odd percent that we're talking about?
See, see, one is we are here in India for over 150 years, so it's not a disappointment. It's more around, see, India is performing below potential.
That's right.
The other thing very obvious is we know our challenges, so it's not that we are dealing with unknowns. So I guess the hope really is that if we know what the challenge is, we know where to go, then we are all expecting more pace. And I think that's what is kind of holding people back, which is India has the potential both in manpower, has the potential in terms of market, has the right demographics. The world commodity prices are low. There is enough and more investment willing to come in. So I think what is really holding India back is India itself. And I
When you
think
say India itself, what do you mean?
so, once we simplify the way we do business here, the way we kind of make sure that when people come here or the way we do our business, things happen faster.
It's still very tough, isn't it?
So I think things are getting, you've seen the global transparency index from 142,
Yes.
we've come down to 130. But should we be at 130? Why not in the top 10? Why not
That's
in the
right.
top 50? So I think we do have the potential. And I think what all of us are striving for and hoping for is we arrive there much faster.
I must ask you a question. The way 2016 started, there was almost like everything that could go wrong has gone wrong in terms of the financial meltdown or the China crash or the oil meltdown. I must ask you this question. And the financial market meltdown that the world has seen and India has seen a fair share. We're down, what, 20 odd percent from the recent highs. I must ask you, has this taken you by surprise? And more so, can we blame it on China altogether, or is there something more than what meets the eye?
So I think if you look at China, second biggest economy in the world, still growing at 7% odd.
Right.
Uh, I don't think so. We should put the entire burden on China by itself. I think we just step back. There are a lot of things which have actually become huge changes for the world. So certainly the commodity cycle is one big change.
Right.
Clearly we've seen a low interest rate regime which we are trying to get out from. And most parts of the world, the growth is slow. So I think we've got multiple factors, and I think they all did come together in the first quarter.
True.
I think the better answer for us is, rather than get so anxious about markets, is to just do the basics right. So I think many parts of the world we need to get basics right. So as long as it is good governance, encouraging good education, getting the skills right, making sure there is movement. So
Right.
you look, this is not a theme just for India. You just go across. I look after the entire ASEAN belt.
That's right, exactly.
You see the challenge in many countries, where you'll find it's difficult to get land to build roads. You'll find it's challenges around how you get approvals, permits. So it's not a new thing which just India feels challenged about. And if you then try and say, if the world were to move very fast on ease of doing business, will the world GDP go up? And the answer is certainly yes. And if the world GDP does go up, will there be great demand for commodities, more employment, better markets? Yes. So I think I think there is a broader theme globally, I feel.
But when we talk about financial markets, the volatility that one is seeing, and some of your peers in the banking space now turn around and say, why are you calling it volatile? When things go down, you call it volatile. When things go up, you do not. It's actually another name for everything that's going downwards. Do you expect the financial market volatility to stay here with us for the next 6 odd months?
So I'm not the best person to answer the question,
I'm asking you from an expert point of view.
but from what we see, I think let's take oil for example. 100 plus has become 30.
Exactly.
So I think the big news is not whether 30 will become 20. Because
True.
the big move has anyway happened. So I think people are overtly focused on will 30 become 20 or 30 will become 40. Frankly, to my mind, that won't change much
True.
in terms of world growth. So I think that's not the area we should focus on.
True.
I think where we should focus on is what are the key drivers for growth, and are we trying our best to make that happen. So I think in a way people are focused on something which I think is already a past event and frankly won't change lives. And I think the focus is on how do we change life and what do we need to do to get there. And I think there's a lot of constructive opportunities in this world. So I think we just need to get there. Infrastructure being one, for example.
Right. Yeah. It's something interesting that you say. There are lots of opportunities. Let's focus on that. And oil is a thing of the past. It has already crashed. It may crash even further, but that's going to be immaterial. But let me ask you another question. Everybody talks about this bad loan mess in India's banking sector, and which is why credit offtake is not happening. The government has to recapitalize the assets. As a banker who's really got his skin in the game, let me just ask you. What should the government be focusing on? Putting in more money, getting the stall projects moving? I mean, it's very easy to say we should be doing all of this. How should one navigate through what perhaps a lot of people are saying could be a systemic risk in the system? Do you believe it's a systemic risk in the making?
So I don't believe it's a systemic risk. I do believe there are a few things which you need to do very normally in any good economy is to have a very healthy banking system.
True.
So I think clearly we should have good rules in place and the rules should be followed with great discipline. And that applies to all the stakeholders in the system. There is a different side to it, which is while we do solve the banking issues, how do we help solve the base issues? So let's say you have a power project or you got a road project and that's not done well.
That's right.
How do we get the move? So I think we need to move on both simultaneously. But clearly, from my perspective, or what we would expect from a good economy to be stable, we need a very healthy financial system, which means rules and discipline are absolutely important.
So when you say rules and disciplines, you believe that the defaulters should be brought to book, whether it's done with law, whether it's done with coercion, whether it's done with some amount of how do I say, nudging. How do you expect this mess to end? And I'm not talking about your bank per se, I'm talking about the system at large.
So I think, there are various different borrowers or different ways, different segments, multiple approaches are required.
True.
I do sense from what I can see around in India, there is a great move by the promoters to find better answers to their debt issues, including getting different buyers, trying to resolve debt through restructuring. So I do think that what we've seen in India, which is a move towards getting better discipline on the credit side, it is showing impact. And I think we should continue at that journey because I do think that if we are very focused and disciplined on it, we'll get the right answers. But I must say that, couple of months in the role, I do see that we are moving in that direction. And I think we should just keep going there.
As long as we're moving in the right direction, we should all be reassured. I must ask you one more question. You've been present in India for the last 150 odd years now. But we're also seeing a new wave of banking in India. Niche banks, payment banks, things like that. How does that change life for the big boys like yourselves?
So I think one is clearly the digital wave is
That's
very
right.
welcome.
Yes.
For banks like us, we certainly have to adopt that whole journey, as well as help the new players in that business. For banks like ours, I think if you look at people who've been clients, their expectation from us is pretty much as high as it used to be.
That's right.
In fact, their expectation is to deliver what we deliver in the past plus digital piece. Market is large. New players are welcome. And I do think the world is changing. It is for us to adapt to the new world. Don't feel challenged at all from that perspective. In fact, I think it's better for us because if you think about digital is the answer, for banks like ours which don't have large distribution, it actually is a positive.
Because you can ride on the digital wave, so
Absolutely. So something that we would have not ridden on in the past, that door is open for us. So from where we sit, absolutely something that we would look as an opportunity rather than a threat.
I must ask you two last questions before I let you go. I'm keeping a top banker in waiting, and that should really not be the norm. But I must ask you a question on our own fiscal space. Oil is at 30, and you said it is a thing of the past, but oil at 30 is a huge bonanza for our own fiscal space. I mean, the government has saved, what, $80 billion worth in revenues. But despite that, the old narrative is back in New Delhi. Should they let the fiscal deficit expand? Should they let growth take precedence over this? According to a top banker, what do you think the government should doing? Should it restore credibility and maintain fiscal deficit to the last decimal point promised, or it's okay, let it expand a little, go in the quest of growth? Because I know credibility matters in your business. Should it matter in government as well?
So I do think that maintaining fiscal discipline would be very important. I think just not for credibility, but also because it'll force us to optimize and prioritize resources.
That's right.
Because once you put a cap on something, then it forces you to look at other answers. I did hear in the last 2 days, both from the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, that there are various answers, whether it's energy saving or wherever else. It doesn't have to be one answer.
True.
So I think actually giving yourself a cap and trying to then find answers would be my preference.
So you would want the government to stick to its fiscal consolidation roadmap?
Yes, but I'm also assuming that sticking to its fiscal target and yet achieving growth is possible.
So you should not compromise on spending, but...
Absolutely. It'll make you more creative. It'll make you push harder. You'll look for answers more deeply. And I think it is worth to do that exercise rather than say that maybe the first answer is just loosen up and then see. I would rather hold it, find all the right answers. And I'm sure, given the creativity and innovation in India, that would be possible.
And if you're not going to fix your fiscal house in order when oil is at 30, when are you going to do that? A last question then. Given the global reality around us, whether it's the China meltdown or oil, or the geopolitical environment that's now beginning to risk the entire world, what elbow room does Raghuram Rajan have with credit rates? Do you expect credit rates to go down further in India?
So I think he's laid out what parameters he would look at when it comes to the rates. And I think thanks to his stewardship, India has done very well.
That's right, yes.
So I do think he's got a few parameters in his mind. He does understand the opportunity rates give and the challenges. Yeah, I think we should watch this space. Too early to make a judgment of where it will go. Sorry. But I do think that he's watching it, he's got his hands on it, he's very well looped in with the finance ministry and the government. I think it's a space to watch.
Has his elbow room been restricted compared to 2 months back, given what has happened around us in the first month of 2016?
I think he would be more watchful. I don't think so anything has been restricted. But I think like everyone else, first thing we all have to do is just let this settle down.
That's right, yeah.
Right? If you think of December and January, what has changed? What has changed? The markets have changed. But the world really hasn't changed. It's showing us a new dimension, but that doesn't mean that everything has changed for us. So I think...
It's the financial markets that are perhaps making more headlines than the economy around us.
Yeah, so I think if you look at fundamentals, it hasn't changed so significantly as much as the market has.
Right.
So I think just take a step back, let things settle down. I don't think so it has put a new answer for any specific economy or geography. The answer is still the same, but I think there is less confidence. So once things settle down, confidence will be back. I think we'll be back on track. And every country and every economy has its own path. It's just getting that path up.
And sometimes it's always good to let time take course.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kanwal, for talking to us. Appreciate it.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.